right, welcome back to the Audience Podcast. I'm your host, Craig Hewitt from Castos. This episode, I'm joined by Ross Winn from Podcast Insights. Ross, how's it going?
Hey, Craig. Thanks for having me. Doing good.
Yeah, my pleasure. So for those out there who haven't run across Podcast Insights, I think it is kind of the go-to blog or site online for a lot of things, kind of informational know-how and kind of how-to about podcasting. Ross, is there any other way you would kind of describe what you guys do?
Yeah, that's basically it. It's how to start, grow, and monetize a podcast. And it's really probably 80-90% is just focused on beginners. So real simple stuff, how to upload a podcast. There's guides obviously on how to start and where to go, kind of step 1 and 2, basically.
I wanted to touch on that because we talk a lot about that internally as far as like our content. And a lot of our content is geared towards beginners as well. I think because beginners maybe need more help to get their show started, right? Because podcasting is kind of just complicated relative to like starting a blog. But also maybe it's easier for us to talk about. Like, I don't know, why do you think that just in general, maybe not even on your site, like there's so much more content out there for just the beginning part and maybe not as much for how to really grow and monetize your podcast?
Yeah, no, I think, I was actually just talking to someone about how the ecosystem itself is complicated, just the way you have to submit to different directories, but then some apps will use the Apple Podcast directory and some don't. And, it's pretty complicated to figure out exactly that whole world when you're first getting started. And, I know you and me, we understand it, but when you just have an idea and you want to start a podcast, none of that is even a thought. And yeah, I just think that, podcasting is just becoming it's becoming more popular. We just passed 1 million podcasts, and yeah, it's just as more people listen, I think more people want to create them. So I think that beginner content is just always useful. Yeah.
I think that one of the risks that we see is there's a ton of people that start podcasts and then they get 20 episodes in and say, I have 200 listeners. This is not worth my time. And so I think we are trying to put more and more resources behind not just getting started, but like, okay, now that you're started, like, how do you tie this back into your business? How do you monetize your show, which we're going to talk about later? And how do you kind of fit it in with the other stuff you're doing to make it, I'll say in air quotes, like worth your time or worth your company's time or your brand's time? Because I think that's really like from a longevity perspective, the important thing that a lot of people probably don't really get nailed, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think a big part of it too is that people don't always kind of think through the process in the beginning. Like, for instance, you need to make sure that you are able to podcast for more than 20 episodes, so that you can, like, hypothetically have content for 100 or 200 episodes, and certain topics just don't always lend themselves to do that. So just one kind of aspect of the planning.
Yeah. We talked about kind of monetization. We touched on monetization, and I know that on your site that affiliates and affiliate relationships and kind of full disclosure, affiliate relationships with Castos is included in that is kind of a part of your monetization strategy. And of course, like in podcasting, there's ads, there's paid content that you can do, but affiliate content and affiliate relationships, I think is a popular one in podcasting. How do you see podcasters that do this well kind of implementing affiliate content and relationships in their shows?
Yeah, so I don't know if people are going to maybe like this answer, but I think the key is to have a website, and I'm a big fan of WordPress, so I would recommend a WordPress website just because you can add a plugin in order to create a link that's easy to say and share, for instance, and there's a handful of those out there. But I think having a place to send people so that they can learn more, and you might just mention something in passing on a podcast, but you can send them to a full blog post about what you've talked about, and it's a lot easier to read and click and see images of stuff, whatever. You can provide a lot more resources and value on a website. So I think that's kind of in my opinion, a crucial aspect of affiliate marketing.
And kind of bridging that gap between like we're on the podcast now, people are going to listen to this, maybe not driving in their car because nobody goes to work anymore, but like walking the dog or going for a run or something like that, and then getting those listeners back to your website. Like, what are some things that either you do or you've seen other kind of savvy marketers or content creators do to bridge that gap between like a listener on the go and engaging back with your brand on your website?
Yeah, I also on kind of another thing to add. It doesn't have to be the first thing, but an email list kind of ties in well with that, and that's what I've seen a lot of people do well. Is they'll say, "Hey, go to my website to sign up for my email list to get, say, a free guide or some resources, or I offer like a free email based course, for instance," and that tends to work well. So it kind of is a good way to drive people back to your site, and then subsequently to your email list, and then from there you can kind of, you have that one-to-one relationship similar to a podcast where you can send them messages to let them know about new episodes or about new blog posts or other, services or products that you want to promote. Kind of all ties together. So I think that's kind of the big one, is the email list on top of the website.
We talked about email marketing a bit in a previous episode, but would love to hear kind of your setup and kind of tech stack or approach to that whole thing, from like lead capture on the site to email marketing and a lot of those tools that you use there.
As far as the email marketing platform, I use ConvertKit, and I've been with them for several years, and it works great. I haven't like really compared a whole lot of them, but it does the job. It's easy to use, and I have an opt-in right on my homepage so that I can just send people, say, hey, go to Podcast Insights and sign up for the email series. They don't have to search around for it or remember a special URL or something. So I think something like that, or maybe in a menu bar, you have a link to sign up for your email list, make it easy to find so people don't have to hunt for it. And as far as I also use a service called Opt-in Monster to create opt-in boxes and pages and pop-ups and things. So I just think they're one of the best. I tested out a ton of them years ago, and they were the only one that didn't have, I don't know, random issues and stuff. So I use that and kind of tie Opt-in Monster into ConvertKit, and then from there.
And is the kind of like incentive or the opt-in kind of reward that you're offering people the email course that you mentioned before?
Yeah, that's the main one. I also offer some like comparison guides and maybe like a podcast starter kit on equipment. It's just a real simple PDF that kind of gives someone something they can like take away after reading a post. So nothing like overly complicated really, but the email course is definitely the main one.
Gotcha. Kind of talking about other things that you or we do kind of on our sites. The podcast that you run, and this podcast is one part of a lot of other things that we do for our brand and that we do for marketing. And I think that's true for a lot of people. There are a lot of people that just have a podcast and it's kind of a standalone thing, but there are a lot of people for, their church or their political organization or their company or their nonprofit or brand, that the podcast is like kind of just one piece of it. How do you think about that your podcast is kind of one piece of the rest of the stuff you do, and kind of how do you make decisions around like what is in a podcast and what is in a blog post and what is in an email?
Yeah, so for me, I keep it pretty simple. I'm kind of a website and blog first, and then the podcast is essentially like a repurposed version of blog posts where I kind of can expand in my own words on things, but it's basically the same content, and that's just one approach. I know other people will maybe interview customers or get testimonials, or there's kind of lots of fun things I've seen with different brands start doing, telling stories around how their brand is just kind of one part of the customer's journey or process.
Has that kind of place where podcasting fits into your content always been the case, or has that evolved over time?
I didn't start with the podcast. I started with the written stuff because my background is really in online marketing and SEO and paid advertising, all that kind of stuff that falls around written word. And then the podcast was I mean, I'm talking about podcasting, so it was clear that I needed one
Hmm.
to kind of make it more, I don't know, legitimate, I guess. But I also think it's fun. Yeah.
I think that's a really good point because we were the same way. We had a previous show to this that never really got any traction. It was kind of like what we were talking about before. Is we just didn't think about, okay, what are we going to do that we can talk about every week forever? And so we just kind of got off on the wrong foot there with our first podcast. But and then this podcast really started at the beginning of this year of 2020. And Castos had been a company at that point for 2.5 years, and a podcasting company. And so I think we should have done it better and sooner. But I think it's maybe for everybody out there who hasn't started a podcast yet or is just getting started, like, don't beat yourself up too much about it. There's always time, and like today is the best day to start a podcast, and tomorrow is the next best day, maybe.
You're not alone too, because when I first started the website about 3 years ago, a lot of podcasting companies didn't have podcasts either. So it was kind of surprisingly common.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad to hear that you do some repurposing of your content for your podcast. We do some of that. We've just come off kind of a we're not doing in seasons, but we're doing in kind of themes, I guess. And we kind of run in themes of interviews and then episodes where it's just me talking about a topic. And I talked about email marketing a while back and kind of recording good audio. And a lot of those monologue episodes for me have been repurposed blog content from our most popular blog posts. And so that's cool to hear that that has worked well for you. And it's I think we've gotten really good feedback from listeners saying like, hey, this was really helpful to hear somebody talk through, these 5 things that you need to do to record really great audio. And people take a lot away from that. I think part of it is almost just like cognitive, that if they hear someone say it, they process and retain the information differently than if they just like skim a blog post and don't really consume the whole thing. I don't know. Do you feel that?
Yeah, definitely. No, I mean, I know that like some people might read something really in depth, but you're definitely right. If they hear it, it probably sinks in more. But also, I think that they can be different audiences too, and that's what
Mm,
I've found quite a bit is that some people will read, some people will listen, and you could probably add YouTube in there. Some people will watch a video, and there's not as much overlap as you would think between those different platforms.
yeah, yeah. One thing I'd like to kind of just get your take on is kind of like where we are in podcasting. I mean, it's not a new medium at this point, but it is relatively new compared to something like blogging, or like conventional print media. But like, where do you feel like we are in the life cycle of podcasting? And like, where do you think it's going in the next couple of years? Get out your crystal ball and let's see.
Yeah, right. I know that's a good
No
question
pressure.
too. Like I know I've been following all the Spotify news too with them buying up different companies, and it kind of makes it more up in the air, I feel like. But I think it's still really early, and as far as I mean, I don't know, blogging's been around for what, 20 plus years or something, and podcasting, even though it has been around for a long time, it still feels really new. It doesn't feel like it's as mature as a lot of those other platforms. But as far as predictions, I don't know. I don't know if I'm
No, no worries, no worries. You mentioned that like the Spotify stuff makes things more uncertain. What do you mean with that, and why do you think that's the case?
yeah, I just think because as kind of different companies sort of become their own walled gardens in a sense, and it it kind of reminds me of like I don't know, TV networks or how you have to go on Amazon Prime to get certain shows and Netflix for other ones. And I don't know. It's kind of hard to see if that sort of ecosystem is going to work well with podcasting, or if people are just going to, it feels like people just use one app to listen. And I don't know if that's true or not, but that's how I at least
Mm-hmm.
listen. I don't switch back and forth. So if something's only on Spotify and I don't use their app for podcasting, I probably won't even think about it or find it, and it won't. It's just not top of mind. So it'll be interesting to see, if people kind of their habits, if they're willing to switch back and forth, or if people are just gonna kind of stick to one place.
Yeah, it is interesting. We've had a lot of people, companies in the space come and say, we're going to be the Netflix of podcasting, or any kind of these platform approaches, I feel like. And yeah, I don't feel like a lot of that is healthy for listeners, which is really like what is going to end up driving content creators and other companies like ours that are supporting the industry. Listeners adopting the technology and consuming content there and doing that easily is what's going to make the medium successful. And folks that are wanting to kind of segment that more and more, I feel like are kind of impeding that progress. I do agree that like for video, everything is on YouTube, and that makes it really easy. So like maybe a winner, a single place would be the easiest. But I think that would have been Apple Podcasts, but they certainly are losing ground these days.
Yeah, and it's funny because you mentioned YouTube, and today as we're recording, there's some antitrust things going on in the U.S. And if YouTube got broken up and split off, and then Google had to compete with them, and there might be another platform eventually. So it's interesting, kind of to, I don't know, follow along and see what happens. But
Yeah, somebody put it the other day, said, I don't know where this is going to go, but it's a fun place to be, for businesses like ours and for content creators to be, participating in the medium and kind of adjusting as we go. I think it's a lot of fun to say, this is what it is today. I have no idea what it's going to be 2 or 3 years from now, but we're here and we're going to be, participating and adopting and adapting as things go. I think it's really cool to be in an industry like this. Yeah, I feel very fortunate. You mentioned the kind of free email course, and then I know you have kind of a more thorough and robust course on podcasting. I would love to hear kind of how that came about and kind of what that looks like now.
yeah, so the email course, that's a great question about how it came about. I read a ton, so I'm sure I saw some someone mention something about online or email courses, and kind of ran with that. But I thought it would be a good way to kind of give people a little bit of content every day or every couple days, and not overwhelm them with, here's the 30 things you need to do to start a podcast, but
Mm,
let's just focus on your topic today. And then, a couple days later, it's how to record. So it really lets people kind of focus in on that smaller topic of, instead of the whole podcasting thing, which can be quite a bit, I think, at times.
yeah.
And I actually created a course about building a WordPress website for your podcast. And it's focused on just people who are like brand new beginners, don't know, how to install or what a server is or anything like that. So it's really just designed to get people to build that website so that they can kind of do that stuff I talked about earlier, build an email list, offer affiliate products, and have written content that they can be found, through SEO, Google, stuff like that. So that's the course that I have now. And I do plan on creating a bigger kind of podcasting course, but that's still in the works, actually. So
Gotcha. And how like for the course you have now, kind of how many modules or how long would folks expect kind of consuming that to take?
you could probably go through it in a few days if you just kind of went through it quickly. It's broken up pretty small. So I talk about how to sign up for a web host, and then how to get WordPress installed. And I go through kind of a beginner option, and then more of an advanced option for people. And then I go through
Hmm.
how to install plugins and what plugins I recommend. And I've tested probably thousands at this point. So a lot of research behind that. But yeah, just ones that I recommend for beginners. Most of them are free, so that it's easy to get started without investing a ton. And then I usually try to give options, though. If you want the free option or if you want the paid option that might be a little better or easier to use, try to give not too many options, but maybe
Yeah.
two. And then kind of how to connect your podcast and make sure you can embed your player, stuff like that. So have a few different ways. I know there's a lot of methods, I guess, these days that you can do that, but the goal is just to make it as easy as possible for people to get that stuff up.
We see a lot of folks coming in just saying like, I want a podcast, but I have no idea. I have no idea how to do any of this. I don't know what a feed is. I just want to publish to Apple Podcasts. And yeah, I mean, I think we say a lot of times like education, and I mean, all of ours is free for sure. We have like a whole big old huge course that's entirely free. Is the key, I think, for enabling a lot of people to get started with podcasting. So kudos to you for kind of taking it one step further and showing them like how to build a website and actually kind of have a place for your podcast that that you can go do other stuff with, whatever that means for people. Because I think it means something different for everybody. Like what the purpose for their show is and the other kind of things they want to do. And yeah, I mean, I agree. WordPress is great because it's really extensible in any kind of direction you want to take it.
Yeah, and I think just having a website too, just to expand on that, makes it a lot easier to share your podcast and your episodes because we're still sort of in that Apple versus Google thing. So if you go on Apple Podcasts and share an episode, potentially half your audience can't listen with a click. They'll have to go search for it, and it's a whole
Yep.
thing. So I think just having a website to send people to is just easier for that whole process.
Yeah. Yeah. So Ross, of the students you have go through kind of your course and that are on your email list that you kind of correspond with, I would love to hear for folks who want to like monetize their podcast directly through ads. Are they joining like a dynamic ad insertion platform like a Megaphone, or are folks going out and like selling the ad and recording it and kind of statically inserting it into the episode themselves? Like, what are you seeing for kind of beginner to intermediate podcasters?
Yeah, for the beginners, it's I don't even think they qualify for most of those top platforms, to be the top 1% or half a percent or something. So
Mm,
they're definitely reaching out to companies that are a good fit with their podcast and their audience, and creating them kind of on demand for those advertisers. A little more manual process, but you can definitely get a lot more revenue, I guess, for the size of your audience.
yeah, no, I think we see a lot of the same stuff that actually I think folks can sell ads directly to companies that are aligned well with their brand and their audience and make a lot more than they could on a CPM basis.
Yeah, because what they average $20 or so. So if you
Mm-hmm.
have
Yeah.
1,000 downloads, you're only getting $100 an episode. Yeah, that's not quite enough to run a business. At least, I mean, you might cover some costs, but
Yeah. As somebody who kind of, I don't say lives and breathes, but works in the podcasting space all the time, I'd love to hear, are there people you see doing like really cool stuff that you think listeners of the show should check out? Like people that are creating content in a really interesting or cool way, people monetizing their shows really in an interesting way, or anything like that. I'd love to hear kind of people that you, I'll say, look up to maybe.
yeah, no, that's a good question. I feel like a lot of the people I tend to follow are sort of in the marketing space, so they they tend to monetize through courses and kind of other maybe services or memberships that they offer. And I actually was kind of thinking about this the other day because you might read a report about how the podcast advertising industry is X amount of dollars, but none of the kind of more private course sales and stuff are reported in that. And I would
Mm,
have to imagine that it's got to be a massive amount that just isn't reflected in any kind of public data. But it's not. Yeah, those are the ones that I kind of see a lot. I guess that's not terribly unique, but
no, I mean, I think that's a really good point. I mean, especially right now, with COVID and the world, frankly, that we're living in, I think a lot of people are searching for connections with other people. A lot of us are doing it online. A lot of that is going through podcasting, but a lot of that is going through membership sites of a lot of different flavors, right? I mean, anything from, mentioned like church groups, religious organizations, political groups, local like Rotary clubs for folks in the U.S. And not just like online business membership sites, but really like brick and mortar folks taking some of their value online. I was talking to one of the founders of MemberSpace, which is a big kind of membership platform, and they said they've seen just enormous growth from conventional companies and brands bringing at least some of their value online. Even things like gyms. Nobody can go to the gym, or nobody wants to go to the gym right now, but gyms are taking their content online and teaching remotely and things like that. So, yeah, I think that's a good point that maybe all of us should think about how we can give some kind of virtual aspect to what we're doing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, especially right, especially now that it's the only option, and people still crave that community and interaction and stuff. So it's definitely the time to at least make it possible for your community and audience.
Yeah, yeah, cool. Ross, it was really great to catch up and kind of get your take on a lot of these things, marketing and community and what folks are doing with their podcasts. For folks who want to check out more about kind of what you all do, where is the best place?
Yeah, you just go to podcastinsights.com is where you can kind of learn everything about how to start, grow, and monetize a podcast. And feel free to sign up for the email course if that sounds useful, or just browse around. There's a search bar.
Cool.
No pressure.
Awesome.